Here's a question nobody asks about Pastor Jeff. What does he actually want? Not what he says he wants, not the sermon version. What does he want? Underneath the smile and the good shirt and the Bible verse he's got loaded for every occasion. I used to think the answer was nothing, that Jeff was just furniture, the nice pastor, harmless, a guy who exists so the show has someone to marry people and bury people and crack the occasional joke about tornadoes. And then I actually sat down and mapped every major decision Jeff makes across the whole show. Every single one. And here's what I found. Jeff isn't warm. Jeff is calibrated. Every kindness, every forgiveness, every "I'll pray on it," it's not coming from his heart. It's coming from a calculation. Cost versus benefit. Every time. That's not a moral failure, by the way. That's not me saying Jeff is secretly a monster. Honestly, it's almost the opposite. What if Jeff is doing exactly what psychology says works? Running the most textbook version of a very real personality trait, and doing it so smoothly that an entire fictional town, and most of the audience, never clocks it. I promise, by the end of this, you'll never watch a Pastor Jeff scene the same way again. Welcome back to Sheldon's Attic. Today we're going up into the attic to dig up the one Cooper family relationship nobody talks about. The one between Mary and the man she trusts more than her own husband. So here's the concept we're using today, and it's simpler than it sounds. Psychologists call it Machiavellianism, 1/3 of what's known as the Dark Triad. It's not about being evil. It's about running on strategy instead of feeling. Manipulation as a default setting, image management as instinct, other people treated, quietly, as resources.
And Jeff might be the cleanest case study Medford has to offer.
Let's start small, because the small stuff is where the pattern is easiest to see. When Jeff's marriage to Selena first shows up on screen, Mary isn't just his church secretary. She becomes his marriage counselor. Basically by accident, because the man can't handle his own relationship without dragging in an audience. And what do we learn about that marriage? Jeff lied to Selena, exaggerated how much money he had, kept up appearances he couldn't actually afford, all so the picture looked right from the outside. I mean, think about that for a second. This is a man whose entire profession is telling other people not to lie. And the first fact we get about his own marriage is a financial lie, told specifically to protect an image. When it finally collapses, and it collapses hard, Selena straight up leaves him a note saying life's too short to be married to a loser. Jeff doesn't grieve.
He doesn't even really process it on screen. What he does is show up at the Coopers, shaken, needing somewhere to be seen struggling. Not somewhere to actually struggle. Somewhere to be seen struggling. There's a difference, and Jeff knows the difference better than anyone in Medford. And then, and this is the part that got me, Robin shows up almost immediately after. A cop. The woman who pulls him over for running a light. Within a handful of episodes, they're married. Now, here's where I want to be fair to Jeff for a second, because that's not how Machiavellianism works in real people. It's not villain math, where he sits there going, "A police officer will fix my reputation." That's not what this is. It's faster than that, and quieter than that. It's instinct. A functioning Machiavellian personality doesn't calculate consciously most of the time. It just gravitates, automatically, toward whatever repairs the image fastest. Jeff probably felt something real for Robin.
That's not the point. The point is that the direction he drifted in, every single time, happened to be the direction that fixed his reputation. Selena falls apart. Status collapses. Robin arrives. Status restored. Married to a cop? Back in good standing? Sermon on Sunday like nothing happened. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. And it's the first data point in a much bigger one. Here's data point 2, and it's colder than the first one. When Georgie gets Mandy pregnant outside of marriage, Jeff doesn't offer comfort to the family that's about to be publicly judged by half the congregation. He fires Mary, pushes her out of her own job at the church she has given years of unpaid loyalty to. Not because she did anything wrong, but because her family became a liability to the church's image. George actually calls him out on it directly, right to his face, and Jeff still frames it as compassion, a leave of absence.
A sermon about forgiveness, delivered the same week he's shunning the family that needed forgiving. And then, years later, once the scandal has cooled and the story's moved on, Jeff brings Mary back. And here's the part that would be almost funny if it weren't so precise. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't explain the years in between. He just lets her back in and lets it read as grace, as him being the bigger man. That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness costs you something. This cost Jeff nothing. He fired her when she was a risk. He rehired her when she became useful again. Steady, devoted, exactly the kind of congregant a church needs. Same woman, same loyalty the entire time. The only thing that changed was Jeff's math. Now here's the moment that actually made me sit up. George's funeral. Jeff runs it. Of course he does. He's the pastor, that's his job. But think about what Jeff actually knew about George. He knew George wasn't a believer. He knew George only sat in those pews because Mary needed him there. Privately, the two of them were just regular guys. Jeff drank beer with him. They joked around like friends. None of that careful pastor voice. And then George dies. And Jeff stands up in front of the whole town and runs a full religious service for a man who never really bought into any of it. I didn't clock how strange that was until I actually sat with the funeral scene and asked myself, where's Jeff's grief? And the honest answer is, it's not there. What's there instead is competence. Jeff leads the family through arrangements, offers to say a few words, keeps the whole thing moving with the practiced calm of someone who has done this more times than he can count. Which, to be fair, he probably has. That's part of the job. Funerals are supposed to be handled with composure. But here's the thing. A friend doesn't just handle it. A friend cracks a little. And Jeff doesn't crack. Not once.
He performs comfort for Mary instead of actually being uncomfortable alongside her. And Mary, grieving, exhausted, looking for anything solid to hold on to, reads that steadiness as strength, as exactly the kind of rock she needs right now. And here's where it actually clicked for me. In the exact same stretch of episodes where Mary is at her most fragile, we watch her lean on her faith harder than ever, pushing her own kids toward baptism, spending more time at that church than she has in years. Jeff isn't manufacturing that grief. He'd never need to. He doesn't have to create the vulnerability. He just has to be standing there, calm and available, when it happens naturally. A Machiavellian personality doesn't need to start the fire. It just needs to be the only warm building around when the storm hits. Third data point, and it's small, but it might be the cleanest one of all. Years later, in the spin-off, there's a moment worth pausing on.
Mary secretly gets her baby granddaughter CeeCee baptized without asking Georgie or Mandy, without any of the parents' permission. And who does she call to make it happen? Jeff. Now, a pastor with actual convictions has a decision to make here. Baptizing a baby behind her own parents' backs is not a small ask. It's a real ethical line. And Jeff doesn't push back. Doesn't ask Mary if Georgie knows. Doesn't say, let's loop in the parents first. He just performs the baptism, quietly, exactly the way Mary wants it. No questions asked. I want to be precise here because this detail gets exaggerated online. This wasn't Jeff's idea, and it wasn't some grand scheme he cooked up. It was Mary's plan. But that's actually the more interesting fact, not the less interesting one. Jeff didn't need to initiate anything. He just needed to be the kind of pastor who says yes to his most devoted, most useful congregant without asking a single hard question. That's not neutrality. That's a choice. Just one dressed up as no choice at all. Look at all three data points side by side. With Selena and Robin, it's image. With Mary's job, it's risk management. With the baptism, it's loyalty to whoever keeps the church running. Different situations, same underlying math every time. What protects the institution? What keeps the most valuable people close? What costs Jeff the least? So what are we actually looking at here? Not a villain. Villains know they're doing harm and do it anyway for the thrill of it. That's not Jeff. Jeff almost certainly believes every single Sunday that he is a good and faithful pastor. That's not hypocrisy in the dramatic sense. It's something psychology finds constantly in people who score high on Machiavellian traits. The strategy isn't hidden from other people because Jeff is lying to them. It's invisible because Jeff has never once had to lie to himself. That's actually the most unsettling version of this trait, not the least.
A con artist knows he's conning you. A textbook Machiavellian personality doesn't need to know. The strategy runs quietly, underneath conscious thought, dressed up as instinct, as kindness, as what a good pastor would do. Jeff never has to choose between honesty and manipulation because in his head, there's no gap between them at all. And honestly, that's what makes Medford's most comforting character also its most efficient one. Every important person in his orbit, Mary especially, gets exactly the version of Jeff that keeps them closest to the church. Not because Jeff sat down and planned it, because that's just what calibrated behavior looks like from the outside when you finally stop calling it kindness. Try naming one scene, just one, where Jeff makes a choice that actively costs him something. Not a scene where he looks generous, a scene where it actually costs him. Still thinking? Yeah, me too. I went through the whole show looking for it, and I came up empty. Honestly, it reminds me of a manager I had at a summer job years ago. Always smiling, always so proud of the team, and somehow, every single decision he made happened to protect his own numbers. I don't think he was evil either. I think he was just running on the same kind of autopilot Jeff is. Jeff isn't the villain of Young Sheldon. He's something quieter and, honestly, a little more familiar than that. The nicest person in the room, who has simply never once had to choose between being good and being safe. Because in his mind, being safe always was the good version. And if this changes how you see Jeff, it's worth going back and watching our video on Mary next. Because once you understand her, you understand exactly why she was the perfect person for a Jeff to end up next to. Two very different survival strategies, built for each other, without either of them ever realizing it. If you want more of these, the psychology hiding underneath Young Sheldon's nicest, funniest, most harmless characters, that's genuinely what this channel is for. Subscribe if you want the next one when it's up. And tell me in the comments, who else in Medford deserves this treatment? Because honestly, I don't think Jeff is the only one running a script he doesn't know he's running.